Okay, for the nice introduction. So today I'm going to talk about U.S. mobility, changes in American travel behavior, and the implications on fuel consumption. So I work for Aramco. Aramco is a large oil company. We produce 10% of the oil consumed daily. So out of 10 barrels, one of them comes from Saudi Arabia. So at the risk of sounding like I'm beating a dead horse, but petroleum plays a large part in transportation. For every barrel of oil produced, 72% of it goes into transportation. And from a transportation perspective, 92% of it comes from petroleum. And the EIA projects that this will increase in the near future, mainly in non-OECD countries. And in a developed nation like the US, consumption is projected to remain roughly constant. So, oh, wait, that didn't work. Okay, so consumption from a passenger vehicle perspective is a combination of the type of vehicles you have on the road, their fuel economy, and how much you use these vehicles, so VMT. But there's a lot of conversations about whether it's going to be EVs in the future, autonomous vehicles, maybe a little bit less so conversations driven by the utilization of these vehicles. So in this talk, I'll talk a little bit more on that. So, oh, good, the video's playing. So in my study, I used a survey called the American Time Use Survey. It's a survey done by the Bureau of Labor Statistics between 2003 and 2017. They survey roughly 12,000 individuals annually, and the individuals come from the Current Population Survey, CPS. And so they capture 400 different activities we perform over the course of a day, 70 different travel categories, and also 10 modes of travel. So whether if you're going by car, by bus, on a subway, walking, and so forth. So everyone's probably watching this little video I have going on the side instead of listening to me, but but in the circle, there's a bunch of activities. These are out of the 400 activities that they capture, and I think it's a little hard to read, but the blue is leisure, and at 11 p.m., lots of people are going to sleep, so that's yellow. So, and more people are going to sleep. There's some individuals who are working at night, and as morning comes, there's going to be an explosion of activity. So it goes from sleeping into not sleeping. So around 6 o'clock, everyone's going about doing all sorts of things, working, sports. So in the middle, I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's a travel function in the middle. So it is also captured in there. So like the National Household Travel Survey, that's a portion National Household Survey captures. But in this one, they actually just captured the whole day. So their purpose is not to study travel, but it just so happens to be part of your day. And that's a part I study. So at 4 o'clock, lots of people are leaving work, going to eat, doing all sorts of things people do in the day. So this is a X, Y, Z plot of the previous plot. So all those dots moving are people doing activities, people traveling to do activities, and this is the travel portion of it. I broke down the weekday travel and the weekend travel. There are distinct peaks for weekday and weekend, and the individual lines, I don't know if you can see it too well, but they represent individual years. So it doesn't change much from year to year. So between 2003 and 2017, we do roughly the same thing at the same time. And some of you may have seen this before in other literature. I think civil engineers do this. They do traffic flow, and they have a similar looking peak. But even in theirs, I haven't seen too much of this, but these peaks are made out of things, like reasons why we travel. So the different colors represents why we're going somewhere. So if we take the 7 o'clock peak, most people are going to work, and some people are taking care of their children or other dependents. So that's the dominant 7 o'clock peak. And then as you go through the course of the day, there's other activities we are traveling for. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And the peaks, so each color also has a bunch of lines too, and that's for individual years. So again, it doesn't really change much from year to year. We apparently do the same thing every single day, every single year. So I think this is like this strong travel habit, I think it's actually kind of good for autonomous vehicles. It's very predictable. We do the same things over and over again. But it also has maybe negative implications to it. We may be habit-forming creatures. At 7 o'clock, we either have to go to work or this is when we want to go to work. So we don't have a choice well, we don't want to. So maybe if you want to say, well, we can reduce travel at 7 o'clock and trying to flatten out that curve out into a box, maybe it'd be difficult for some people. They don't want to, they can't. So that's some of the difficulties for autonomous vehicles. So how do Americans spend their day? So some of you may have heard the old adage that our cars are parked 95% of the time, and that's very much true. So we spend 95% of our day doing activities, and 5% of our day roughly traveling. And if you discount for sleep time, the traveling portion goes up to 10%. And, oh, okay. So for activities, the bluish looking box on the bottom is socializing and relaxing. The reason why this is so large is because weekends are involved. Next is working, household activities, eating and drinking, and care. For travel, the top categories are traveling for work, travel for consumer purchases, socializing, relaxing, caring, taking care of people, and eating and drinking. Notice that these categories don't really match activities category. So, I mean, some categories don't have a travel, like household activity, you're just at home. So, but they also don't change much year to year. So it's the same 5 categories we perform most of the time, each year after year. So I call these the 5 core activities, 5 core travel activities. And the survey also shows how we get about. So 87% times by automobile. There are other forms other transportation methods we use, such as subway or by walking, but that occupies much less of our time. So from an oil company or energy company perspective, we're thinking about this in terms of travel in terms of energy, so time in terms of energy. How do we translate time into energy? So if we take a snapshot of 2017, we spent 62 minutes travel by automobiles. So that comes out of most of the 8.3 million barrels of oil equivalent per day for light-duty vehicles, which is 60% of the 13.8 million barrels of oil equivalent per day for our 2017 energy needs. So basically, in 2017, 62 minutes per day consumed about 17% of our total energy consumption. So another way of looking at this is from the oil perspective. So I guess I probably should have made this into a pie chart, but I had bar charts. So the 62 minutes can also be broken down based on activities. In 2017, we spent about 15 minutes per day going to work, 12 minutes for consumer purchases, 8.5 minutes for socializing, relaxing, and so forth. So if you take the proportion that out of 62 and times that by 8.3, you get about 2 million barrels per day for work, 1.65 million barrels for consumer purchases, and 1.14 million barrels for socializing and relaxing. So now we have a reason, not just why we travel, but what these oils used for, not just 8.3 million barrels for about 30 miles traveled or 12,000 miles a year. So there's some reasons why we go somewhere. If you think about it, very rarely do we ever get in a car to not go anywhere. So we go somewhere, and there's a reason behind it. So how has it changed? In 2003, we spent 67 minutes on the road per day and took 3.7 trips. By 2010, that went down to about 62 minutes, and we took 3.2 trips. And it's since plateaued a little bit. And so this is like a national average. It's also looking pretty different for different age groups. I broke it down by seven age groups, and each age group is like a 10-year increment. I group everybody to 66 plus. There's a little bit lack of data for some of the older generations. They didn't survey too many 85-year-olds. But I also broke down that 15 to 25 age group. I wanted to separate the high school age kids to young adults. So in 2003, we spent 16 minutes a day traveling. And there's 2 colors. One is green, one's blue. The green is what I call the movers, the people who traveled a lot. And the blue are the people who travel less. So a lot, I guess I define above average travel. And blue, the non-movers are below average travel. So the one interesting thing is the 19 to 25 traveled the most, actually, in 2003, 76 minutes per day, and the 66 plus is at least 47 minutes per day. So by 2017, this curve looks pretty different. So the average went down from 67 to 62 minutes per day, and the group that went down the most was those who are 19 to 25. Probably not too much of a surprise to people here. And not only did they go down the most, they went down by, I think, 16 minutes. They went from a high traveling group to a low traveling group. And those who are 15 to 18 also went down quite a bit too, by 9 minutes. So the only group that went up in travel time are those who are 66 and older, and only a little bit by 3 minutes. But the rest of the group all decreased. Everyone are not traveling as much as they used to. Okay, so that was just a 2-year snapshot. This is a year after year. The gradient just means light is 2003, dark is 2017, everything in between. So there's a lot of decrease in terms of average travel time, in terms of number of trips that we take. And for most of the age cohorts, the decrease occurred between 2003 and 2010 timeframe. And since then, for a lot of them, it's plateaued. Some of them it's even increased a little bit. The only one that didn't seem to change too much are those 66 and older. They travel about the same as they used to. And so we can also look at it. So I also decided to look at it based on activities. So I don't know if you remember, but I mentioned previously, these are the 5 core activities. I decided to kind of plot them backwards. Work occupy most amount of our travel time, and eating and drinking occupy the least amount of our travel time. And plot it in reverse mostly because if you plot them in decreasing order, then everything just looks like they're falling. But I want to show that it actually looks like they're falling no matter which way you plot them. So for a lot of them, it's decreasing, and I don't want to go through every single one of them, but if we take 2 of them, for example, caring for people, it's decreasing quite a bit for those who are aged 19 to 35, particularly for those who are 19 to 25. Even more so for between 2003 and 2006 timeframe. And in terms of socializing, is for those who are between 15 to 25. So in fact, actually in 2003, there appears to be 2 traveling groups within this category. Those who are 26 and older, who don't travel very much for socializing and relaxing, and those who are younger, who travel quite a bit. By 2017, it appears those age groups have approached the older generation. They're traveling about the same amount. People are not traveling for socializing and relaxing anymore. They're staying put. So what does this all mean? Between 2003 and 2017, it's actually a really interesting time frame in our lives. A lot happened then. I don't know if you guys remember, but Facebook came online in 2004, and by 2005, a lot of people had an account. Amazon became a major player in our lives, and we have the iPhone that came about, and Netflix was really popular, and still is really popular. So a lot of changes happened. And so today, some of these trips that, these trip categories can be displaced or transformed. So a displaced trip mostly fall into the socializing and relaxing. So if you are socializing on Facebook, if you are contacting your friend on LinkedIn, if you are, I don't know, in Twittering or whatnot, or you're viewing content on YouTube, viewing content on Netflix, these trips are not made. They're just not made. So the oil is basically displaced. So other trips, such as e-commerce, for example, can be transformed. It will be transformed. So instead of you driving your car to a grocery store to buy food, you may get it delivered. So in some of this instance, it may be a transfer from gasoline to diesel. And so these changes, I think, will have some impact on future energy demand. And alternatively, some way to think about it, technology and social changes may be limited to each travel category. So I get a lot of questions, I guess, at work. It's like, oh, how will this technology impact oil demand? How will this technology impact oil demand? It's a little hard to say, how will drone delivery impact oil demand? I can't put a number to it. But I think in using this data, you get a little bit of a sense It's a little hard to say, but if you look at the orange is consumer purchases. It consumed 1.65 million barrels per day, so 20% of our energy consumption in 2017. And if you take grocery shopping, for example, and let's say in a hypothetical situation, we don't go to a grocery store anymore, everything gets delivered by drone, that's 0.4 million barrels of oil equivalent per day. So at that point, we know it's 5%. We're looking at 5% of our oil. So you get a sense of what each of these things mean. And so in summary, Americans participated in 5 main travel categories, including going to work, consumer purchases, socializing and relaxing, caring for people, eating and drinking. And these 5 categories consume 80% of the reasons why we go anywhere. And in 2003, Americans on average made 3.7 trips per day and spent 67 minutes on the road in a car. Compared to 2017, Americans made 3.2 trips, or half a trip less than we used to, and spent 62 minutes on the road. So the rate of change is much more significant for those who are 25 years and younger, but less so for older people. So I think maybe a deeper picture is necessary to understand our future travel demand.